Good afternoon. So many connections from this one person in hearing about NLP and about graphic notation composition and about Dream Dancer. My wife was one of the first saxophonists in the world to play Dream Dancer in its original form. So, as I was introduced, I'm from the Hart School in Connecticut, and I'm here in part today on behalf of hundreds of collegiate band directors who've had the honor of knowing Michael and having him come out to their schools and work. Literally hundreds of universities all around the world have taken part in that tradition. You might say that I've known Michael now for 25 years. I was a graduate student at the University of Michigan at the time, and I was attending my first College Band Directors National Association convention. That was when I first heard Winds of Nagual. It was in the early 90s. After that performance in the hall, I just sat there stunned by what I had just heard. And it took me 10 or 15 minutes to move out of my seat because I was still trying to process what just happened, because it was so different than anything else that I'd ever heard out of a band, particularly. So like everyone in the hall, I had the desire to meet Michael, and I dared to dream of the day that I would have an ensemble that could play Winds, as it's known. Fast forward to 2008, that's when I invited Michael to the Hart School to be in residence with us for a residency that included 12 of his works, which also included, as you can see here, his great piece, Urban Requiem, for a saxophone quartet and ensemble. But when I invited Michael for that residency many years ago, I expected it would be one of the great musical experiences of my life, a dream come true, which it was. But what I was not prepared for was Michael with the capital M. So instead of talking about him as a musician, I want to talk about him as an agent of change for growth for everyone that he came in contact with. When we first started to talk about his residency, he mentioned that he could do some talks on NLP, had to look that up, and his Kumi lectures. Had to buy the book quick. I agreed, and I picked him up from the airport and delivered him to the school where over 100 students and faculty were waiting for him to speak. When I walked into the room, I saw one of my colleagues at the Hart School who was a true academic. Skeptic, had grown tired, was tenured for 100 years, fought the good fight for many years, and in every way his body and persona displayed that. I was shocked to see him there. After an hour of Michael lecturing about his music, his composition techniques, and all of the different aspects that went into it, he asked us if we wanted to experience it. We all agreed. He instructed us to stack our chairs, remove our shoes, while he put Sting on the audio system. And he instructed us to partner up because we were gonna dance. And as you can see in the next slide, we were dancing. So 10 minutes into the dance, me in a full sweat and all of my students flailing about with abandon, I suddenly remembered that my grumpy colleague was there. And I was convinced that he must have left the room because there is no way in the world this man would be dancing. Until I looked over my shoulder, and behind me, I saw a huge smile on his face as he was flailing about like a madman with Michael leading him. He had partnered up with Michael, rather the other way around, I suspect, because I suspect Michael figured it out right away and went right at him. That was Michael to me, engaging everyone he met, giving them the opportunity to learn, grow, and smile. Just yesterday, I had a dinner with the band director at the Yale University in Connecticut. And then he said that Michael had taught him to eat steak. And I said, me too. So when you're at a steakhouse, Michael would always slice his steak so thin. And we were at dinner one night, and he was slicing it, and then he'd do this. And he would eat it. And I'd said, Michael, what are you doing? And he said, Glenn, it's the only way to eat steak. You cut it thin enough so that you can see the light through it. Then you start salivating, which is the key, and then you eat it. That's the only way to enjoy a steak. After experiencing that first residency at the Hart School, I wanted to continue my connection with him because 1 week was not enough. So I invited him to teach for summer term for us with me. It was a week-long course, 9 to 5, every day we taught. The mornings were full of kumi, and they were full of NLP. And we had about 20 students that were all going to be music educators, and the afternoons were full of graphic notation and composition, teaching our students how to compose with their children in their classrooms. And the mornings were rough because I was not prepared for how deep Michael was going to go in with every single person in that room. How he was going to probe, and how he was going to ask questions that were going to ask them to fundamentally look at themselves in a different way. So we went through the first week, the first year of what was going to be at least a 2-year program. And later on in the fall, I got the course evaluations from the students. And I was a little surprised because some of them had some very strong reactions to what Michael had done with me in that class that first week. And thank goodness that it was a 2-year commitment. Because what I watched was all of the students that came back, they came back the next year saying, you have no idea how much you changed my life by asking the questions that you asked. I was so pissed off at you last summer, was the quote. But now I get it. And we taught together for 6 years, and I saw those 2 cycles 3 times. And it was never failed that the first year students always struggled with that part of it, and that they would always come back then a changed human being. That was a really powerful experience for me. Michael left that stamp on an incredible amount of people as he came through our system. And this brings me to the last chapter with Michael, which is still being written. For about 7 years now, Michael and I have been working on a publication for teachers called Graphic Notation Composition. And it's to help them enter into their classroom and help their students be successful in creating compositional material, creative play, as we would call it. And so as we started developing this method, I came to Toronto and had the great pleasure of meeting Neil for the first time, because we needed some video that demonstrated what we were doing and how we wanted to put it together. And that's when I first came to Neil and his absolute genius. He, like his father, shares so many amazing qualities. And Neil volunteered to put these videos together for us. And I'm happy to say that we have a publisher, and it's going to be called the Colgrass Method, and of compositional graphic composition. And instead of speaking anymore, I thought maybe we would just listen to Michael talk about it and demonstrate part of his genius.
Hello, I'm Michael Colgrass, and this is my colleague, conductor, Glen Adsit. And if you're a music educator, we're here to talk to you today. You face endless challenges in your work, and you now have a new challenge. In the 9 national standards for musical education, it says, number 4, composing and arranging music within specified guidelines, which means thou shalt teach composing and arranging in the classroom. Now, how in the world are you going to do that when our universities don't teach that to music educators? Are you going to get another degree in music composition as well? Or are you going to spend some extra time studying harmony and theory and counterpoint and orchestration in order to teach children how to write music? Well, we're here to tell you that you don't have to do that. That there's a simpler way to teach the whole process that Beethoven and Stravinsky and others have gone through.
Step 1 is that process which is designed just to get the students up to the board and, as Michael said, having a good time. And it has never failed in every time that we've done this, that the students laugh and giggle and have a great time expressing themselves with these markings on the board. And little do they know they're actually composing. At that point, I think they're still thinking we're having fun making marks on the board and singing them. And what you would do in the classroom is to discover with the students the principles of what composition is all about. What makes a good composition? Why is it that Beethoven and Stravinsky, as you mentioned earlier, are still in the consciousness of us as great composers so many years later?